On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, we ask a very simple question about your Toronto Raptors and their offseason. Did they get better at all?
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, July the 12th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is in the description of the podcast. It's free to join. It's a great place to come hang out and, watch Summer League, have really, really strong Summer League takes for some reason. Talk about the food you're making, your sports card collections. It's all going on in the Locked On Raptors Discord. A great place to come hang out with sickos just like you who love the podcast and want to see all of my takes in their glory as they, come out of the sausage factory or whatever. This is where the podcast gets made, in the Discord. Come hang out. We'd love to see you in there. Of course, you can find the show for free on your audio app of choice. Follow, subscribe, rate, review. Of course, tell a friend. Much appreciated when you support the show. However you support the show on the audio side of things. And you can go to YouTube and subscribe to the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel as well. When you do that, hit the tiny little notification bell button, and that will give you a push notification to your device of choice every single time the show is about to premiere or go live, which is, of course, a wonderful thing. Today's show is brought to you by nobody. There's no title sponsor. Let's dive right in, baby. As we are welcoming in our pal Vivek Jacob for a little round of did they get better? We're going to talk about the Raptors, whether the roster is better after the offseason moving and shaking, mostly just the stuff they did during day 2 of the NBA draft, which was the peak of offseason content for the Raptors. We'll get into whether the offense stands a chance of being better than it was last season, and does the defense have a hope in hell of stopping anybody? They didn't last year. Maybe things will be better going forward. Let's bring him in. It's Vivek Jacob. Big V is here, fresh off of a loss for his beloved Dutch national team in the Euros. Canada loses this week. Tough go for you, man. The sports karma has turned around after India winning the World Cup. Was it worth it for you?
I mean, yeah, for India to win the World Cup, I'll take these L's. It's okay. That's like number one on the priority list. So I'll take it. Djokovic is in the Wimbledon semifinal, so we'll see how that goes. And so if I get 2 out of 4, that won't be bad. But honestly, you can't look at the Canada result like a bad thing. They got to
it's a failure of the program. They didn't have the quality. They gotta really reevaluate the overall strength of Canada soccer, or whatever the takes are. It was
so
awesome.
Far it's 2 out of 3. And we'll see if it'll be 3 out of 4. Semis today, final on Sunday. Oh man, Sunday is gonna be just a peak sports viewing experience. Wimbledon final, Euros final, Copa final, and then Raptors Nuggets Summer League, baby.
Let's go! The single most important sporting event happening this weekend, other than Raptors Thunder in Summer League, baby. Yeah, it's going to be a loaded Summer League weekend. Hopefully, by the time we're back next week, some members of the Toronto Raptors Summer League team have proven that they are, in fact, too good for Summer League. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? All right, we'll leave Summer League for another time. We'll have a Sunday morning episode talking about the first Summer League game as I prepare to go away on vacation, and the schedule is going to be a little bit wonky, okay? Deal with it. All right, let's dive in to the order of the day, which is to determine whether or not the Toronto Raptors got better this summer. And better, of course, can mean different things to different people. So we'll examine it. It's an open-ended concept for us to dive into, but the tail of the tape on the Raptors offseason. Out the door, Mohamed Ugay, bye-bye. Jalen McDaniels, sayonara, friend. Jordan Nwora, gone just like any hope of the Raptors playing defense went when he arrived on the team. Jonte Porter, Gary Trent Jr., out the door, and Malik Williams, we hardly knew ye, no longer with the team. The Raptors bring in Brandon Carlson on a 2-way contract. Ulrich Shamshay with the 57th pick. Davion Mitchell in that trade with Jalen McDaniels going out. Jonathan Mobo with the 31st pick. Jamal Shed with the 45th pick. Sasha Vezenkov in the trade with the Kings. And Jacoby Walter 19th overall. Of course, they re-signed Scotty Emmanuel quickly and brought back our boy Garrett Temple as well. They obviously don't quite factor into the did they get better of it all because they were on the roster last season. But I guess just the simple question off the top, is this a better roster that the Toronto Raptors are fielding? They lose a starter in Gary Trent Jr., but does the sort of return of a bunch of guys who figure to have higher upside perhaps than some of the guys who are going out sort of make up and sort of account for the loss of Gary Trent Jr.? Are the Raptors better roster-wise before we dive into the various ends of the floor? I guess there's only two. It's not various. There's just two ends of the floor.
I think they are marginally. I think when you look at where they improved, it is around the margins. So you've got Mobo in. Obviously, you've got our buddy Jacoby in. You've got Davion coming in for some help at the point guard position. And so you're better in that regard. You expect Grady Dick to be better than he was last season. We'll see where Ochai is at coming into summer league and then into next season. So I think I'd say that they're marginally better, especially when you look at what the minutes distribution probably figures to be. I don't think anyone's looking at this roster and expecting a huge change. If anything, the huge change just comes from being healthy, right? And and that's probably where you see the most tangible improvement and just having stability on the roster.
Yeah, I think as far as like for next season, 2024-25, it's probably a slightly less potent roster because of the loss of Gary Trent Jr. And, you're hoping Grady Dick can kind of step in and fill that role and become something close to Gary Trent Jr. within a year or two. And I think that's on the table because, frankly, I think Gary Trent Jr., for all the good he brought, was also someone who, in theory, is pretty easy to replace, which I think is the reasoning the Raptors had for drafting a couple guys in Dick and Walter who could eventually supplant him anyway if he were going to be on the team. I think why I think the roster is better is I think it has higher upside for the long term now with the 4 rookies coming in. And yes, they're 4 rookies drafted between 19 and 57. There's a lottery ticket element to a lot of this, and I'm sure that all 4 are not going to hit in the way Raptors fans really hope they all hit. But you have some extra lottery shots there. I think Jonathan Mobo brings you some real upside with just the skill and ball ability he has at his size, the defensive potential he has as a versatile, switchy guy. I think there's upside there. I think Davion Mitchell, as much as I'm not high on Davion Mitchell, is a reasonable second draft guy to go and say, hey, like we think there's more here than he was able to show off in Sacramento. So there's a little bit of upside there if things really hit for Davion Mitchell, and he becomes like a nice combo-ish guard for you who can defend guys at the point of attack and really improve what was a sore spot for this team last season. I think they're in a better spot roster-wise, and I think just by virtue of probably not rolling out 30 different players next season over the course of 82 games, it's just going to be better overall. But I do think the Gary Trent Jr. thing matters a little bit here. How much do you think? Because I don't think any of the other losses really matter in the grand scheme, right? I'm not missing Jordan Wara, not missing Muhammadu Gay, Jalen McDaniels, or the Jonte Porter thing we don't got to relitigate. But I just, while Gary Trent Jr. is probably the best player of all the guys we've talked about here going in or out, I'm curious how much of an impact you think his loss will have. Is it more of like a cascading thing where all of a sudden Grady Dick is being asked to do too much and starting and playing too many minutes? Does that cause problems at the back end of the roster? Like, I think it's an interesting thing, and it's a tough thing to compare because the roster was so misshapen and different at different spots of last year. But that's the fun of the podcast. It's an ambiguous question that makes for good podcasting, baby. The impact of Gary. What are you looking at with him? Are you concerned about it?
I'm not concerned just because, what's it changing really ceiling wise, right? And it's not like, oh my God, this dramatically changes things. The priority right now is development. The priority is this rebuild. And so in terms of the goals, there's nothing to really be concerned about with his departure. I think from the shooting guard perspective, would I have liked more of an easier transition for Grady where it's like, hey, you've got Gary as the starter. Once Grady is really up to speed, then you can kind of look to transition out of that. I think that's more, even in terms of, yes, there'll be more opportunity for Jacoby, but again, I think it would have just made the transition easier to have that kind of surefire starter. Because if he was around, that would be the starting lineup, right? Like
Mhm,
Yak,
mhm.
Scotty, RJ, Gary, quickly. So now, obviously, you can look at it a lot of different ways. Do you go with Ochai Abaji in the starting lineup? Do you go with Bruce Brown in the starting lineup? Do you go with Grady Dick? Do you go big with a guy like Mobo? Do you throw Jacoby into the fire? Now it's just it's pretty much like a end of
They're
roster
spoiled for
battle
choice with other
that you have
shooting
in
guards
training
they could
camp
try
that
out
you have
there.
going on for shooting guard, right? So
Yeah.
exactly. So I think that's gonna be probably the biggest battle that we see outside of when you go to training camp and have that end of roster battle.
Mhm.
But yeah, now it's just we could just have a revolving door at that shooting guard position.
Yeah, I think all told, the loss of Gary again hurts in the immediate, and it could be 3-4 months and we're not feeling that at all because Grady Dick is ready or someone else. Ochai Abaji has a really great developmental summer and looks the part. Again, I don't think reaching Gary Trent Jr. level of impact is going to be necessarily all that difficult for anybody. It's just, how ready are those guys? It's a very young team. It takes some time. And for all of Gary Trent Jr.'s faults, he's been in the league for 5, 6, 7 years at this point. And it's just, you have a little bit more sort of equity as a guy like that than someone coming in fresh faced. But yeah, the upside thing I think is where I'm happiest. It's just like it felt before like there was no chance of any of the back end of the roster guys really popping. You're putting your hopes on, Javon Freeman Liberty and, two-way guys you've signed. Like, I think there's actually like a reasonable level of hope that can be had about Jamal Shed becoming like a mainstay of the team for the next handful of years, or Jonathan Mobo being good, or Jacoby Walter being the type of player that good teams need, like a two-way, 3-and-D guard wing type. Like that's the type of guy lots of teams need, and I think that's there in the upside for Jacoby Walter as well. So yeah, roster little marginally better for the long term, maybe not so great right away, but that is fine. They did a decent job of that. Could they have done a better job? Probably, if they declined Bruce Brown and used that money for something else, but we don't got to relitigate that because we've done that for the last 3 weeks on the podcast, and I'm tired of that. All right, we're going to come back on the other side and get into the offense. The offense last year had brief stretches of squinting and being able to see something interesting. A lot of not that as well. We will get into whether the Raptors have a capacity for offensive improvement after this offseason coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you want at the prices that you want as well, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back at it here with Vivek Jacob from Raptors in 7 and Sportsnet, and hooting and hollering this Sunday at a sports bar near you, probably. Let's dive in, Big V, to the offense. Last season, the results, not so good. 24th in the NBA in offense in the 2023-24 season. Again, they had little stretches here and there where it looked like maybe things were coalescing in an interesting way. But alas, it was not to be, and things really cratered down the stretch as the offense was just miserable. That said, the process for the offense, I think, was pretty good overall. Per Cleaning the Glass, the Raptors finished 10th in location effective field goal percentage. So basically, what you'd expect they would shoot on average with regular players taking the shots that they were creating. They were creating good looks within the process of their offense, the Darko offense, the 0.5 stuff, and all of that. They just weren't connecting them because a lot of the players taking those shots were not very good. And so I don't know really how that makes you feel about, if the roster is slightly less talented in the immediate, does that make it even worse of a situation for the offense going into this year? Is another year in Darko's system grease the wheels a little bit and give them some capacity for improvement? A couple other notes on their process. Number 6 in rim attempts, as far as like a percentage of their overall looks. That's very good. They were a very good rim pressure team last season, and 4th in short mid range, which I think is interesting because Scotty Barnes, that's an area where he can get to. He hasn't always connected from there, but as a rookie, he did, and it got a little bit better last season compared to year 2. And I think there is a short mid-range wizard somewhere within Scotty Barnes. We know Emmanuel quickly has the floater. We know Jakob Poeltl has those push shots. This is a team that can live in the short mid-range and make those looks really count. So that's there in their shot profile as well. Didn't have the crazy three-point volume you would have hoped, only 23rd in overall shooting frequency from three-point range in terms of number of attempts per game and all that. So, yeah, it's a mixed bag process-wise. How do you feel about their capacity to be better on that end of the floor next season with this roster they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting off with the three-point shooting, if you look at you'll get a healthy dose of threes from Quickly. You'll get a decent amount of threes from Scotty. And then it's like, hey, how many more threes is Grady Dick taking?
Sure.
Because if you look at the start of last season, what you're trying to replace is about the 6.5 threes a game that Gary was taking, the 6 threes a game that OG was taking. And that's kind of the key area where you're looking at in terms of the 3-point shooting. And so how much of that is going to Grady? How much of that is Jacoby getting in there? And so I think that's going to be pivotal, how much Scotty improves his 3-point shot. And so that's where I think the challenge lies in the 3-point shooting. There's just not a lot of options. And so, if you even go back 2 seasons, right, when it was Gary, OG, and Fred, and we were always kind of like, that was the season where it seemed like one of them was always out of the lineup. And so it always felt like, oh my God, like OG and Fred have to take like 10 threes each a game just to make it kind of passable. And now you feel like you're almost in a similar situation where it's like, man, you really need Grady and Quickly to get up as many shots as possible from beyond the arc. So I think that spacing will be an issue. You talk about, Scotty's obviously going to speak highly of his teammates and say, hey, every time I pass the ball, it feels like it's going to go in. But I don't think as fans or as, people covering the team, that we necessarily feel that. Right. And so I don't think this team has that kind of gravity, that kind of shooting quality. And I think that is going to create limitations in terms of what the degree to which Scotty can attack the paint and kick out, the effectiveness of just generally running the pick and roll, and how teams are going to be willing to help. And so I think there's definitely going to be limitations. I think we'll still be able to enjoy watching the process of the offense because of Darko's system and keeping the ball moving. But I still think it's going to be a bit of a grind this season.
Yeah, I struggle with this a little bit. I think I am maybe a little higher on the shooting juice the team has compared to previous seasons than you are. And I think it's largely because the guys who are going to be taking a lot of threes, you mentioned Quickly, Grady Dick. I would imagine if Jacoby Walter plays, he's going to be asked to get him up in just absolute high volume like he did in college. He was well over 50% of his shots came from 3 as a college player. And I think the thing that I like here is that Quickly and Dick in particular are just way more dynamic shooters than OG Anunoby or Gary Trent Jr. to sort of reference those examples you made. I think Fred VanVleet, pretty dynamic shooter, good off ball, obviously at the pull-up juice. But I think Quickly with his mix of pull-up and scurrying away from the ball off of screens and stuff, like that's just a three-point threat that teams have to care about more than Gary Trent Jr.'s stationary, couple jab steps, pull up 3, sort of 3-point arsenal. And OG Anunoby basically a stand in the corner and catch and shoot wide open threes type of guy. I think Quickly is he's got a way more dynamic array of threes he's throwing at you. And I think that's true for Grady Dick as well. I think Kelly Olynyk's going to be a big part of this, right? Like he shot like 40% from three last year. He's basically just like a tried and true 40% 3-point shooter at this point. When he's on the floor, which I would imagine is going to be for north of 20 minutes a game, he's going to be getting them up a ton, I would think, because I think they're probably going to play him straight as a four and just kind of work him as a spacer and a guy who can put the ball on the deck and attack a closeout, which he can absolutely do.
So just quickly,
yeah.
the reason I didn't mention him was because he got up about 2.5 attempts from three last season.
Sure.
During his time with the Raptors. Do you see him getting more threes up?
I think so, because like he was playing in large part as like one of the main creators on that team, right? And he's had stretches, he's had seasons in Miami, for example, for his stretch back in 2021. He shot 5.7 a game, right? Like he has dabbled in higher volume. And I think just playing with Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickly for longer than the 10-game stretch he got with them is going to lead to a whole lot more just sort of organic looks within the offense. He's not going to be asked to carry the same creation burden he did as like the second best player on the team down the stretch. So I think he'll just get organically. Maybe it's not 5 a game, maybe it's 3.5 or 4, but I think that helps chip into the deficit that you are fighting to sort of fill in with Gary walking out.
Yeah, fair enough. X factor obviously is going to be RJ. I mean, if he can keep shooting 39% on those 4 or 5 attempts a game, that'd be amazing. And so I think that's going to be kind of an X factor when it comes to the Raptors 3-point shooting next season.
100%. I've talked about RJ. I think the fact that his threes are basically all wide open threes at this point, maybe it's not 39%, maybe it's 36, 37, but I think he can be passable and get enough up over the course of a game to give you that sort of math net edge that you need. And I also think, look, I'm not high on Davion Mitchell. I'm not, but he shot 36% last year. He only took 2.2 attempts a game, but if you protract that out to per 36 minutes, as my basketball reference page messes up here, it was 5 attempts per 36 minutes. He has been around that his whole career. If he can hit 36% on 2-3 attempts a game, I think that is, again, every little bit will help. I'm not counting on that necessarily, but he has taken strides as a 3-point shooter, which need to be noted as well. So I think if Sasha Vezenkov plays, he's a dead eye 3-point shooter. Probably nothing else, but there's some 3-point volume to be had there. And I just again like the dynamism of Quickly and Grady, along with the rim pressure this team does create and is very good at, with Barrett barreling towards the rim and Scotty, being a really good interior finisher. We know what Yock can do there. I think there's some fun creative stuff they can do in bench lineups with, Bruce Brown working short roll and stuff like that. I think the offense is going to be better, I guess is what I'm getting at here. Is it going to be top 15 in the league? Probably not, but I think its upside certainly is that if everything really hums along and the guys take the requisite steps you're hoping to see, I think they'll be better than 24th, I guess is sort of my end thesis here. Would you pick that as well, or you think they might struggle to clear where they were last season?
I mean, they might be better than 24th, but if I had to answer whether they crack the top 20, I'd probably say no. I'd lean towards no.
Yeah.
And I think, say if I were to ask you right now, the Raptors finished 27th in 3-point shooting as a team last season, 34.7%. How much better do you think they'll be this season?
I mean, the accuracy thing feels very much variance based. I think they'll be better percentage wise, probably just because they had a lot of very bad players taking a lot of threes down the stretch. But when it comes to frequency, I think that is where things get a little bit more interesting and kind of important, right? Like I think the volume is just as important as the accuracy. And so last year they were 24th in volume of threes. I think there's a world. I think they will be better than that. I think they're probably getting into the top 20 just in volume. Whether they connect them, I don't know. But I think Grady's probably going to be emboldened to take as many as he possibly can. I think Quickly is going to flirt with taking 9 or 10 a game. And that alone is going to give them the volume to just be a little bit higher than your teams that are kind of stuck in the, we don't like to take threes and we're just, refusing to move into the future kind of thing. So,
right.
I think it's, the process, I think, will continue to improve with the system. The results, I think, we probably continue to see subpar results based on the process just because of the true talent on the roster. Defense. We're going to get to that coming up. Can you be better than really, really, really terrible? You hope so. We'll get into that and whether the roster is capable of being better than the 27th best defense in the NBA coming up in just one sec. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And look, the big thing that you really can get into the habit of sometimes when you look at Instagram and you're seeing people's lives, the summertime's happening, people are going on vacation and stuff, is you can really get into the problem of comparing yourself to others. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on their Instagram, but in reality, they probably don't. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. It's a beautiful thing, just having someone to talk to sort through how you're feeling. Totally normal to feel like you are not at the same place other people are. But if you have someone to talk it all that with, you can feel a whole lot better about where you are at your station in life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Rounding it out here with Vivek Jacob from Sportsnet and Raptors in 7, his Substack newsletter. Everyone go check that out. Of course, reminder, you can check out Locked On Leafs, our daily Toronto Maple Leafs podcast here at Locked On, as they cover the Buds in a offseason where they've done lots of stuff, some of it smart, some of it not. And, that's an endlessly frustrating hockey team. If you want to go listen to a podcast about the endlessly frustrating hockey team, our boys Mike and Dave are your place to go. So go check them out. Locked On Leafs, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's finish up with a look at the defense and whether it will be better than it was last season. Again, a reminder, it was a grim scene last year for your Toronto Raptors after it seemed like they had the juice on defense to start the season. Remember the Dennis Schroeder, OG, Siakam, Barnes, Pirtle group, impenetrable. No one's going to score on them. They were really good for like 2 weeks, and then they fell down the defensive charts basically for the rest of the season in a steady tumble, like rolling a wheel of cheese down a hill in Britain. They finished 27th in defense. Very, very bad. I mean, like, how could it not be better, Big V? Tell me why. Like, let's start with the negative side of this. Like, why is it worse with the guys they brought in and Gary Trent Jr. going out? Jalen McDaniels, I guess, in theory, was a good defensive player, although I don't think that ever really happened in practice. Is there a reason why it could get worse, or is it only up from here?
I do think it's only up from here. If I had to really, really nitpick, like that's the thing. I think you would have to nitpick and find like the exception to think that this team will be worse defensively than last season. And what would that exception be? What would that nitpicking point be? It would probably be that, there is no natural, big sized wing defender. And so you're going to go into those games against the guys that OG loves to guard, and you don't have that option anymore, and you're going to struggle, right? And so, again, you go back to the point that you want Jakob Poeltl and Scotty Barnes defending the rim and playing in the back line. And so who do you have on the perimeter that's necessarily going to be that stopper? Ochai is undersized. You look at Mobo, that's a lot of expectations to put on a rookie. You look at Jacoby, that's a lot of expectations to put on a rookie. And so I think that's where the challenge will lie. I think that's where they'll face the most difficulty. You can take a lot of confidence in the rim protection. But I think when you look at even at the point of attack, quickly, how much does he improve his defense? RJ, how much does he improve his defense? Though that's where you would pick at it. But at the same time, that was the case last season. So you don't expect it to be worse.
Yeah, right. And I think, Jakob Poeltl missed 32 games last year. Yeah, he's a guy who'll miss 10 games a year or so, typically. Most guys do. But 32 games feels like an outlier. He had 2 extended stretches, including the last month and a half of the year. And without him, the defense had no rudder. And so I think just by having Poeltl for more than 50 games, they will be in better shape. I think Scotty took great strides defensively last year. You hope that sort of solidifies and refines and only gets better as well. And like, there just simply has to be some improvement from RJ Barrett. He was very, very, very bad as a wing perimeter defender. He's been better than that in his career. And I just, can he get closer to average? If he does, that is a pretty significant change for things here. When you look at the new additions, obviously, yeah, Mobo, it's a lot to ask of a rookie. That said, he's enormous and has 7'2" long arms, and maybe can just give you a little bit of length and juice for stretches of minutes that someone like Jordan Wara was not giving you off your bench in that similar role. I think, look, Jamal Shed, if he's going to find his way onto an NBA floor this season, it's going to be because he is an absolutely menacing point of attack defender. Got some more on Jamal Shed's defense coming up in an episode the next week with Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Cougs, who covered Shed's career at Houston. It's really exciting stuff. He's a bloody incredible defensive player. At least he was in college. We'll see if that translates to the NBA. Maybe it's not for a couple of years that we see it, but if there are minutes for him to be had this year, he helps directly in the thing that was their biggest problem on defense last season. So there's that. Davion Mitchell, of course, his nickname is Off Night. If he's playing heavy minutes off the bench, that's going to improve things defensively as well. And I just think the sort of general vibe of this doesn't matter, everything sucks from last year had to have played a role in how the defense performed. They were number 28 in points allowed per possession in transition defense last year. That is the stuff of a team that just doesn't care. Sorry, it just is. And I think there's going to be a little bit more care, a little bit more buy-in this season from the team. They were 23rd in half-court defense, also not very good, of course. And again, I think a lot of defense is buy-in and caring, and there just wasn't any reason for anyone to buy in down the stretch of last season because it was obviously going nowhere, and the team seemingly wanted it to go nowhere. And so I think fresh start, you sort of reinvigorate the culture. The offensive system has been in place now for a year. Maybe there's a little bit more focus paid to defense in training camp. I think last year they were very, very offense heavy, kind of instilling those new principles. I think there will be a better sort of floor for the defense. They could easily be 27th again. I will say they can sort of climb into that like fringe top 20, probably not any higher than that just because of the true talent, barring some enormous defensive leap from someone, be it Barrett or Scotty Barnes is like a true lockdown wing guy. But the circumstances of last year were just the circumstances under which really bad defense gets played. And I think there's going to just be sort of a tangible uptick in the level of want to, if you will, from everyone on that end of the floor. Is that a silly hope for me to have, Big V? I'm about to be crushed and watch another season of just walking by pylons on the way to layups once again.
Yeah, I don't know that that's an expectation I have. I think that's definitely the hope. And I think this is where this becomes a really interesting season for, analyzing and evaluating Darko. Right. Last season, it was like, hey, what is the one thing that we are going to see a tangible difference in? What are you going to incorporate into this team? And you would look at the offense and the passing and say the process was much better, even if the results weren't necessarily there. Right. And so now I think offensively, I would say, OK, we've established to a certain degree the process. Can we see some better results now on that end? And defensively, as you said, there's too many moments where it looked like pylons, too many moments where it seemed like there was a lack of accountability. And that maybe goes to your point about the care level just not being there. And so I think that's something that we should be measuring, should be looking at and saying, hey, this is something we should be able to expect now. And I think that's the area of focus that I'll have. And so I would be pretty disappointed if they were a bottom 5 defense. I probably am closer to you in terms of flirting with that 20 mark, maybe in the late teens. I'd like to, if I had to set like, a high end goal, I would say, can you get into that 16 to 18 range, right? And show tangible improvement on that end of the floor.
Yeah, it's not like Jakob Poeltl can't backstop a decent defense, right? He's not a walking top 5 defense like he's Rudy Gobert or anything like that, but he's a good rim protector, and Scotty Barnes is also a good rim protector who's a good sort of free safety, obviously counting stats machine on defense as well. It's not like this is a totally defensively untalented roster. They just need more defensive talent for things to really have high upside here. But I think just like the collective give a crap meter being higher should sort of lift things up a little bit from where it was. I'd also just love to see, and this maybe just comes with another year of coaching and another year in the system and some more focus paid to the defensive end, but some sort of defensive identity of like what they actually want to be doing out there. It just felt like there was no real designed plan from the defense. They weren't, funneling shots to a specific place or anything like that. They gave up the 16th most rim attempts in the league, the 9th most mid-range attempts, and the 21st most threes. Like it's like, what are they? What are they trying to do? What are they funneling towards? What's their defensive intent? Like, I would like to see some of that. And I think with more intent, with an actual designed game plan of how they want to approach teams, that's going to help as well. And they just didn't really have the capacity to do that because the roster changed 4 times last season. And it was just this constant, recycling of new guys and, just sort of, hey, pick up the basics, go guard the ball, do the basic things and see if we can get by. And they were not able to get by. We did get by on this podcast, though. It was pretty darn good. Do you have anything you want to promote for the good people, Big V, before we send them off into their weekend and Summer League basketball?
I should have my latest Raptors in 7 post out later today, so you can look out for that. Besides that, usual stuff going at Sportsnet, and you can follow me on Twitter at Vivek Jacob.
Everyone, go do that. You can find me at Woodley Sean on the Hell website. You can go and join us on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and join us, of course, in the Discord. Link in the description of the podcast. Free to join as always. Please follow, subscribe, rate, review on your audio app of choice. You can find us on YouTube as always as well if you haven't yet. Even if you don't watch the videos, just subscribe so we get them stats, baby. And with that, we will send you off into the weekend. Again, going to be a bit of a weird schedule next week. I'm away on vacation. I have a couple episodes in the can, a mailbag with Katie Heindel, Jamal Shed deep dive with Parker Ainsworth. And then I'll have a couple of Summer League episodes kind of over the weekend, sprinkled into the start of the week. Just keep an eye out. It'll all be there for you. And we'll be back with regularly scheduled programming the following week as we continue to go daily here through July with plenty of Summer League reaction and overreaction and all that good stuff. Can't wait for the Jonathan Mobo Rookie of the Year train to really pick up. It's going to be thrilling. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for hanging out. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your weekend. Enjoy Summer League. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Ooh.